Welcome to the series, Divine Feminine. I'm your host, Evanique, along with Brian Nelson. Tonight, we're going to study the goddess Oshun. Just to give you a roadmap for tonight, I'm going to start off with the background of the Yoruba culture, and then Brian is going to go in depth on Oshun. And the reason why we're doing it this way, because Oshun is a goddess of the Yoruba culture, which is a modern day Nigeria. And I think in order to really understand Oshun, you need the background and the culture and the African culture. I know for myself, that was very interesting because I did not have a background in African culture. So, it was very interesting and it just added to it. So what we're going to do is this is going to be an interactive presentation. So at certain points, I'll stop and ask if anybody has any questions, and it'll be in certain parts of the presentation. And so with that, let's begin. I'm going to share my screen and hope that it works. All right. All right, can everyone see my presentation? Joe or Shrikant or Brian, can you guys tell me if you can see?
Yes.
Thank you. All right, so starting off with, what does the goddess Oshun mean? And it's spring or source. So at first, we're going to talk about the Aruba Civilization and the ways of the spirit. So the people of the Yoruba Civilization are brass and iron experts. They're also weavers and dyers, carvers and farmers. They used to, they still do. They still farm the land, and their carvings they used to sell around Africa. So it was a very business-oriented organization, but not business in the sense that we would talk about today. As business more in the sense that, they were like their carvings and their weaves and their basically their exports, their products were very much wanted all around Africa. So they used to sell their products around Africa. So just a little bit about that. And their crops, as you can see here, supported a complex civilization. So the Yoruban civilization was one that was very popular and, amongst Africans. So now I want to go into the spiritual life of the Yoruba. And the reason why this is important, because this will lead up to the goddess Oshun, but it's good to have a background because I didn't know this. So talking about the spiritual life of Yoruba, it's an animated universe, and that, there are many stories around it. There's many, visualizations around it, like trying to think of the exact word. It's kind of like, like when you hear the stories of the Yoruban culture, you can like visualize it in your head. The stories that they tell are just very vivid. You can see the colors, like even the goddess Oshun wears vibrant colors of yellow and red. And so it's just a very animated universe when you're talking about the spiritual life. There's a concept of continuous creation. The Yorubas believe in reincarnation, and that, the ancestors come back into different human beings, similar to Hindu and other cultures that believe in reincarnation. But they also recognize the one supreme reality. One of the misconceptions of the Yoruban culture is that they believe in many different gods, and that's not necessarily the whole truth. They believe in one supreme being. They don't believe that the being is called Oldemare, which is the ground of all being, but they don't really see this person as a male or a female. Um, it's kind of similar to an energy. It's kind of similar to Tao. It really can't be named, even though we call it Tao. You really can't name it. Similar to, I think it was Friday when we were having the presentation on the Gita, um, where, you know, I think I think it was Dave Dittamore, he was talking about Yahweh, and Yahweh means like cannot be named. So even though we as human beings like to put male or female attributes to this concept of God, the Yoruban people don't. And they actually believe that it's kind of, I don't, for lack of a better word, ridiculous to put um, a human aspect on a concept that cannot really be defined. So I just thought that was very interesting. Um, and one other interesting point is that the Yoruba believes that every human being chooses their own destiny and mental disposition before birth. And Oldemere is a witness. Um, Now, I know there's some similarities to Calvinism and predestination, but I think what's unique about this is that they say people choose it before they're born, and they choose what they're going to go through. And the reason why they choose this is believed is because of spiritual growth, or is something that they need to learn. So I just thought that this was just so interesting. Um, so continuing on with the spiritual life of the Yoruba, um, so the world of spirit is consulted in three ways. There's a value system based on honoring ancestors. And the thing of it is that I noticed like with different cultures, when you're honoring ancestors, that the ancestors are never really seen as gone from the earth. They're just kind of surrounding you in spirit. Um, so they really have a value-based system where they consult the ancestors when they have a problem. Um, Ash helps connect the past and the present. Every generation owes the existence to the generations that preceded. And that's again bringing back that past and the ancestors into their life today. And Ash, by the way, which I'm going to go into, so I'm just going to talk about it just a little bit, is kind of like a spiritual force. It's not really a person or a god or anything like that. Um, and like I said before, the Yoruba believe in reincarnation. Uh, so then the next one is divination. Um, the most respected Yoruba priests and priestesses are those who possess this knowledge. And this is where they're consulting again with different ancestors and different types of spirits to solve a problem, or they're consulting with the Orisha, which we're going to go into. But this is just like kind of an introduction. And it's based on the individual relationship with the Orisha. There are 17,000 Orishas, just as little known fact, but they're not they're not all as popular as Oshun, which is one of the Orishas. And there's certain Orishas that are popular, and then there's this lesser known Orishas, but they're not gods in that they're not immortal. So I know it's easy because it's still in my head to think of them as gods, but they're not exactly gods or goddesses. So next we're going to talk about Ash. Dumare, which is again the ultimate god, or I keep saying God because that's what I'm familiar with. I apologize. You don't have to think of it as that. You can think of it as the universe or the spirit. But Oldemare is believed to be present in the world as a vital force called Ash by the Yoruba. This ever unfolding life force, which is cyclical in nature and infuses all phenomena, is considered a driving principle in the evaluation process. I think I'm reading this from the screen, and I know it seems a little weird, but I just wanted to get this right from the book because I just thought this part was beautiful. Ash may also be compared to a divine energetic current that flows through many conductors, such for example, as human vessels of greater or lesser receptivity. Those are the priestesses and the priest that I talked about in the previous slide. Um, those are the people that, and in order to be a priest or a priestess, just as a quick note, is that you have to study for years, and you have to study with people that have 10 to 15 years experience. And interesting to note, you have to have like 10 to 15 years experience to become a priestess or a priest, and to be considered well known. So to grow in ash is means to respect the elders, to seek um, guidance, and to participate and to properly honor the Orisha. You are considered to be, which are, I'm sorry, who are considered to be personifications of ash as expressed through the forces of nature. So these Orishas are different, they have different qualities, they have different personalities, which is similar to human beings. So um, so I just thought this was interesting. And again, this was so interesting to me because I didn't know a lot about it. So if I don't seem like an expert, it's because I'm not. So I just wanted to make that really clear. Um, and now we're going to talk about the Orisha itself. Ash finds its expression in the pantheon of deities or spiritual beings that are referred to as Orisha. And as I said before, uh, these are different aspects of a singular concept of divinity. So, you know, I think of it as the Orisha is like, has different qualities similar to human beings, but it's also, since, you know, the life force or Oldemare is ultimately in all of us, like it's all around us, and it's the creator of human beings that it's kind of in us. So the Orisha are expressions of that. Um, the your the Yoruba believe that the Orisha would wither and die without the ash of sacrifices, for the Orisha are not immortal. And I thought that was interesting that they would die without the sacrifices. And the reason why I thought that was interesting is because it reminded me, similar to Christian culture and the Christian concept of God. Not that God would die without sacrifices, but that sacrifices were necessary. And I think, in my opinion, it's just because you you have to like focus on it. Like if you don't focus on something, it dies. So, you know, if you are like, it's similar to if you stop learning about things, your brain dies, right? Like if you stop learning about certain concepts, or, you know, you don't exercise that muscle, it dies. And I think of that as similar. Um, each Orisha possesses a specific character trait and is identified with a natural phenomenon. You'll find out that Oshun, one of the natural elements that she's associated with is water. And then Orisha are manifestations of the whole of the creation. And, you know, we've already went through this. Each offer a different path to wisdom, health, and success. Um, when the Yorubans had a problem, they would consult the priest or priestess of a particular Orisha that they thought could solve their problem. So they would consult, for instance, Oshun when, especially when women were having a business problem or problems with fertility. Um, and because Oshun was the Orisha for motherhood, for solving of female problems, like the Aruba would consult when they were having uterine problems and things of that nature. So I'll just continue. And now Brian's going to talk about Oshun, and I'm going to switch to his presentation. But while I do that, if anyone has questions about what I just presented, you can type exclamation point in chat or raise your hand in Zoom. Okay, so I assume that there's not any questions so far. So Brian, I'm going to queue up your presentation and you can tell me where to start.
Just start at the beginning. We'll go from the
Okay.
top. So I also have, we've worked together. Evanique was really the inspiration for this series with her presentation a couple months ago on Mary Magdalene. I think Shrikant threw out the idea that it would be great to have a series on the divine feminine And Evanique and I both showed a keen interest in that. I've been interested in that because I've encountered the divine feminine in many through my years of reading in religion and mythology, but never really treated systematically. So I thought it'd be interesting to try to do that. And we have found some sources to help. And the one book that we're using here is the Goddess Power. Goddess Power by Isabella Price. And I agree with Evanique. Some of her writing is just tremendous. So this is the second session. The first was on Isis from ancient Egypt, and then the second one is Oshun, really from a much later period, starting about 900 Common Era, and located as is Isis in Africa. We go to the next slide. Okay, the way I'm going to roll through my presentation is some preliminary remarks, the benefits that are obtained from this meetup on Divine Feminine, the context of Oshun, which Evanique's already talked about a bit. I have some additional observations. I'll try to be lighter on that. Yoruba religion in general, a couple points that just focus specifically on Oshun to tee up my presentation and our discussion there. And then I go through the many different roles of Oshun in the Yoruba pantheon. We're not going to, in the end, we're not going to do two specific roles. There's so many roles. You might choose to focus on any of them. And then at the end, as Evanique said, we can always have questions or comments, but at the end, questions or comments. That's kind of a reminder to me too, that we want to be sure to get through this. So, Evanique, we can go to the next slide. So for those of you who are new, didn't get the Osiris meetup, it's already come out through feedback from participants that they have certain benefits or impacts from participating, and really I think there are good reasons for continuing with this series. The participants are gaining an awareness or appreciation of the divine feminine, which in itself is important because in the Abrahamic or Western tradition, the feminine is in some ways has been actively suppressed. Acknowledge and express gratitude for the divine feminine. That's been important for me personally in all my readings, is to just appreciate feminine aspects of life, or aspects of life that are typified as feminine. Finally, and this is something a participant flagged, provide a forum where participants can speak about the divine feminine in their lives and in others' lives. It's a chance to speak out and to talk about these things. And it's more, again, of this speaking out and sharing becomes an expression of gratitude for the divine feminine. Learning about the goddess quest as a complement to hero journeys. This is something that came out in our first session. There's a lot of talk in mythology about hero journeys. There's also the goddess quest, and that is clearly exemplified by these goddess stories. You can also learn about the sacred marriage. I still have that as something I'm constantly listening for, because I think that's an important concept about men and women working together. And then identifying traditions or aspects of the divine feminine that you would like to understand better. I put that in because in going through this book, I realized that we're not really giving a fair treatment to Isis or Oshun or the other goddesses. There is so much in this. One reason I picked Oshun is that I was just blown away when I first read that the chapter by Isabella Price. It is so rich in material. And now that I've studied it for the presentation, it raises so many questions that I would like to understand better. So these are very preliminary, overviews of each goddess, which really invite you, I think, to, if you're inclined to dig deeper. But for the purpose of here, it's really coming back to that idea of it triggers you to think about the divine feminine in your own life, and then hopefully share that with the group. Okay, let's go to the next. All right, the context of Oshun, historical and geographic. Evanique's already touched on that. The Yoruba people are an ancient tribe originating in Nigeria. Her sanctuary is located in Oshogbo, which is still existing in Nigeria and is the capital of the Oshun province. So this is still contemporary material. Obviously, it needs to be understood in the context. Again, this book is it's highlighting really in a very summary and selective fashion these different goddesses. But for example, in Nigeria now you have Christianity, you have Islam. There are so many other influences, but this is just one of them. Oshun, the goddess, and the river with which she is identified bear the same name. Her sanctuary, by the way, has become a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Evidence for the Yoruba Civilization is found as early as 900 CE, just as was flagged by Evanique. The culture grew because there were abundant crops which supplied a complex urban civilization based on a system of city-states. And that, I think, the city-state system is important. I don't know why exactly, but the city-states also grew up in China. They grew up in the Mesopotamia. They grew up in Greece, and were the incubation chambers for so many different civilizations. Another thing I'd flag geographically is that with the diaspora from the slave trade, Oshun's cult has spread to Cuba, Brazil, and elsewhere in America, and integrated into Catholic traditions and often misunderstood. Key concept there is Santeria. Okay, we can go on. I'm asking for Evanique's help because I'm still learning these things. Okay, again, the current culture. This is something I'd like to flag, and just as with Evanique, I found that Isabella's writing was so good, I really didn't think I could improve on it. This is taken from the end of her chapter, and I think it does a good job setting the context. Much of what's presented in this chapter tends to be historical or traditional, but there is also a current context, and this that really I think illustrates how that these situations are often very complex. It's hard to draw simple conclusions. While Yoruba society, that's a mistype. Yoruba society is clearly patriarchal, with land and other forms of inheritance remaining with the paternal line. And apparently that hasn't always been true with Yorubas, but that's the way it is today. The oral literature and the mythology of, I apologize for this, of Oshun demonstrate the concept of organized sisterhood. That's the key concept. That it operates astonishingly well within the overall societal frame. So that's, to me, the key concept that came out as regards current culture. And then she talks more about that. Organized sisterhood also defines the art of mothering in Yoruba culture. This is something now that I thought was worth putting in, because the context is very different from the context in which most of us are living. And this is current, co-wives and also co-mothers in polygamous households and extended families coordinate familial and communal activities like births, naming ceremonies, marriages, festivals, and funerals. So they have co-wives and co-mothers, how does that work? I don't know. Because they, so again, further study, how do men fit in with this? Women leaders organize large number of females around specific tasks and events. So there's a vital sorority, if you will, that is that still existent today, and this Oshun cult is still a part of that. So if we could go on, I'd appreciate it. All right, here's a quick summary that to tee up Oshun. Olodumare, that's how I say it, is the supreme ultimate reality. And this is one of the things that just blew me away and made me more interested in Oshun. There's so much wisdom, I think, in this tradition that resonates with Eastern traditions. And I don't claim to be an expert on Eastern, but it resonates with my current understanding of Eastern traditions from East and South Asia. Oldamare is the ground of all being. From this supreme reality, all manifest forms come forth and ultimately return. The breath of the supreme reality is the source of all life in a universe that is vibrant and engaged in an ongoing creative process. So I picked a couple points in addition to what Evanique picked. Ashe is Olodumare's presence in the world as a vital force. She covered that nicely. Orisha, Ashe is expressed on earth as a pantheon of Orishas or deities, and they are different aspects or manifestations of this singular god. I'll give you an example other than, and really how they, are born and die. One of the gods is, it's a god, not Oshun. He's the god of smith working. So obviously there was no god of smith working until you had a smith working itself. So you had to discover how to do smith working, and then you'd have a god for it. That's the birth of that god. That's also what happened in the Greek philosophy or Greek mythology with Hephaestus, known as Vulcan in the Roman. The very important god. Ajay, these are powerful beings. This is important, and I think she touched on this, Evanique touched on this. They are beings that are an expression of the spectrum of life's potentialities, both positive and negative, including the fates of individuals. They're like the fates in Greek mythology. And Evanique really nailed that when, explained how people pick their fates before they're born, and they enter into something of a covenant with Olodumare about that. Okay. Go on.
I just wanted to add something really quick, like it just popped into my head, is that the Orisha remind me of the saints of the Catholic Church when you're talking about they're attributed to certain things. Like I think Saint Andrew is the finder of lost things. Oshun has been also compared to Mary, because of motherhood and things of that nature. So just a quick thought. Sorry. So I'll move.
Okay, and here's the thing that Oshun's many roles. She has so many roles, and this is consistent with the Isis mythology. I hope we do Inanna soon. That's Sumerian, ancient Middle East. That's very consistent with her mythology. Divine feminine tends to play many, many roles. Each one of them is important, but the fact that there are so many of them is also worth noting. That doesn't tend to be true of the male gods. The male gods are usually one or two excellences or one or two virtues. But first here we'll look at the creation myth, and it shows how both male and female are necessary for creation. So the Yoruba creation myth demonstrates that for the Yorubas, both male and female deities are necessary for the creation and continuation of life on Earth. And this creation story, actually, it's written up nicely by Isabella Price, but I pulled this one out of the Encyclopedia Britannica. And I've modified it. In fact, Oshun is the central figure in the creation of human beings. Olodumare, that's the supreme being, sent 17 Orishas, or gods and goddesses, to Earth in order to populate it. Oshun was one of the 17 original deities and the only female. The 16 male gods realized they could not populate the earth without Oshun. Pursuant to the male's request, Oshun agreed to help and brought forth her sweet and powerful waters, bringing humanity, other species, and all of life to earth. In exchange, Oshun demanded that all women who, like herself, possessed internal strength and extraordinary courage would receive permission to be initiated into the ways of male power. So there's already there's a lot to talk about in that, but let's go on to the next slide. Does anybody have questions or comments at this point?
If you have questions or comments, you can type exclamation point in chat or raise your hand in Zoom.
To me, it's extraordinary that the female is so central in the creation story. I haven't seen that anywhere else in quite this way. And that there was a negotiation between the male and the female in the creation process. It's also worth noting that the powers, it seems that, Oshun was just one of the 17, so the 16 were male. They each came probably, since they're differentiated, came with their own powers, separate powers. She acquired them in exchange for her assistance in creation. So honestly, I think that's it's a characterization of how cultures evolve in real life. Okay, Oshun's many roles in human destiny.
Oh, Brian, Joe had a question before we move on.
Okay.
Actually, you covered it quite well. I was just going to basically ask, I mean, my understanding is that obviously there's two Oshun stories as far as the beginning. One's more aligned with the Abrahamic religion, kind of. And then there's one that's more where she's central to creation. Is that correct?
I can go first. Yes. And one of the things that's to note is that when the Yoruban people were brought over as slaves, they kind of they took their African traditions and African religions, and they kind of hid it in Christianity. And that's why it has that Abraham slant to it, because they had to bring it over and they had to hide it so that, the slave masters couldn't see them worshiping their gods. So they would, and that's kind of like where Santerre comes from. It's like saint. So they kind of weaved it into the Christian culture. So that's where that slant comes from. Brian, you want to add anything?
No, I think that covers it. That's great. So anybody else? Or can we go on here?
No one's in the chat.
All right. So the next role that she has, the first one was creation, central to creation. And in conjunction with males, entering into agreement, cooperative undertaking. Oshun's many roles in human destinies. This ties in very nicely with Evanique's explanation of how people choose their roles before they're born. In this particular role, Oshun protects the covenants that seal the benevolent and malevolent actions of the Aje. The Ajes are like fate. They're basically the element of uncertainty in life. And as the keeper of those secret covenants, so there are two forces here. One's the Aje and the other's the covenants. The covenants are entered into by individuals with the supreme reality before they're born. And then Ajay is in effect the force of uncertainty as you try to live out these destinies. And here's a key point. As the keeper of those secret covenants, Oshun possesses the power to bind or loosen those covenants. So the when you're before you're born, you pick what you pick your destiny, and you enter into a covenant with the supreme reality about it. But after you're born, you don't remember what the covenant is. So it's a secret covenant. And that's where Oshun has the powers of divination to discover your destiny, and the power to know the uncertainties that can arise in respect of this destiny. And she can modify your covenant, and also has an influence on these on the element of uncertainty. But it goes on to say, as a goddess, as an Orisha, Oshun is a benefactor to humanity, because initiating destructive action against humanity would be tantamount to her own annihilation. So that's right out of the book. The way this is set up is that you need to go to somebody who can divine your destiny and the role of uncertainties in pursuing that destiny. And so divination is a key power of Oshun. And then once you find out what it is, maybe you want to influence it. Oshun can do that too. She can loosen or strengthen or loosen the covenants. So it gives you some flexibility as regards your destiny with the supreme reality. And again, as a second point here, I've added Oshun shares this power with her husband, Orunmila, who is another Orisha. Now, this must be one of her husbands, because she had a lot of husbands. Oshun's marriage to Orunmila reflects balance and reciprocity, suggesting that intrinsic wisdom and knowledge of the powerful forces shaping human lives are qualities shared by both male and female. That's an appreciation from Isabella Price. And again, I thought it was, so well written. I copied it here. Again, the complementary role of the male and female to have a complete understanding of wisdom and knowledge, and the powerful forces shaping human lives. When I first read this, I was so struck by this, how this Oshun and the Yoruba traditions captured so well the complementary roles of male and female. And really, they are very consistent in sounding that chord in all of their presentation. So can we go to the next? Okay, Oshun's many roles. Her role in nature. She's the patroness of the Oshun River. This must have been a very early role that she had, and of all fresh and salt water. So that starts to be a little more conceptual. And here we have, as the source of all fresh water, Oshun is affiliated with the principle of order and harmony. As the source of all the waters, Oshun is the yielding force that is akin to the yin principle of Chinese Taoism. All right, so here in this role, it's not really explained that well in the book, but I'm starting to wonder then what's the male counterpart to this? If she's the water, what are some of the other male gods? And that's really not, to me, that's not so clearly addressed in the book. And but that's the kind of thing that would help to complete the picture. Because again, and Evanique has said this time and time again, the male and the female need to be compatible in these different traditions. Okay, the next point is the goddess of fertility, women, and childbirth, and protectress of her people. As the goddess of fertility, Oshun plays a crucial role in the perpetuation of the ever unfolding cycle of life and death that connects the ancestors, those who are currently living, and the generations yet to be born. The thing that struck me about this is that, yeah, that's actually the role that women play. This I call it the intergenerational role. And it involves birth and death and the stages of life, all of these ceremonies that were flagged earlier. The couple other things, it's very similar. This is very much one of the roles that Isis played in ancient Egypt. And going back even further, I'll note that in the Neolithic era, there were vultures, there are a lot of vultures. Some of the very oldest Neolithic, so Stone Age carvings where there's no writing, vultures are shown at ceremonial sites. Vultures are probably related to death because vultures, even in Tibet today, bodies are chopped up and served to the vultures. So it's possible that that's what these Neolithic peoples were doing. And just in the normal course, vultures are out there eating carcasses, helping with the process of death. For Isis, who's a much older goddess, one of her embodiments was the vulture. And yeah, there is a tie in there. It says that the women are in charge of funerals. It says that in this chapter on Oshun. And guess what? Vultures are kind of involved in funerals too. So vultures are not necessarily a bad thing. They can be a good thing. They help with the transformation and transitions in life. I'll just flag another point on this that it's really tangential, but snakes in the Bible are often seen as bad. But back in the older Sumerian mythology, snakes were good. And maybe one reason for that is that snakes kept down the mice and the rats. They didn't have cats in Sumeria. They had snakes that ate the mice and the rats, and they protected the crops as they were growing and the grain after it was harvested. And that was also a key role for women, was playing that role in ancient Sumeria. So vultures are kind of like snakes. They used to be seen as good. Now they've kind of got a bad rap. Okay, can we go on? Oshun's many roles, mother and wife, Yeye, the nurturing cosmic mother who protects her people. Yoruban cosmology asserts that Oshun has a powerful role as the goddess who, this I copied out of the book because it's such great language. The goddess who expels the breathing human form through her womb, thus forcing it to life and to experience the trauma and joy of birth. Wow, I've witnessed a few births in my life. That is kind of what it's like. It is a real dramatic event. And it's quite a miracle, actually. And then the role as wife, honestly, that's not discussed so much in the book. I'd like to know more about that. But as already flagged, the polygamy seems to be a practice, or certainly was a practice back then. I wonder, with the Christian and Islamic influence, where is all of that today? But as an archetype, Oshun had numerous love affairs with a series of male gods, resulting in many children. And as part of this process, I'm surmising, based on what was written in the book, that Oshun absorbed the male gods' powers and made those powers available to her children and all of humanity. So that's kind of, it's not really stated in the book. I've kind of surmised that from reading it. This, I think, raised the question of what about male initiation? The women, it sounds like the women are imparting all practical knowledge to men. What's the role of men in terms of raising up children, both boys and girls? So can we go on? Ocean's many roles. Again, that, you know, creation of the earth, human destinies, nature. Now we have politics and war. Oba, she has the name Oba as a ruler and warrior. Oshun was believed to be the mother of the first legendary kings of the Aruba. That's from the book. The kind of guessing here what's going on based on the history in Sumeria, especially in Sumeria, ancient Mesopotamia. The first city-states were probably, well, it could well be that they were ruled by women, certainly women as much as men, but that changed as when the city-states became warring states and more the men took over the roles. So this might refer back to an era when women were more dominant in the community, in the hierarchy. And then the transition might be captured in this concept that Oshun became the mother of the first kings of the Arubans. Okay, scholars, then the next point, scholars have defined that the name Oshun served as the title for the ruler of women, which may have preceded male leadership. So again, confirming that point. Female rule may have been prevalent in Oshogbo, that's the capital of the Aruba era, during the period from the 1600s to the late 1800s. So even a very late period. Again, there's not that much in the book on it. And it seems that even the historians are not that clear on that point. It's an interesting one. But Oshun clearly played and continues to play an important role in politics and in protecting the people. Okay, let's go on. And an important role in economics, Evanique flagged that Yalode, she is the mother of prosperity. She acts as the patroness of craftswomen, female traders, and entrepreneurs. And this dates back to the period that Evanique was talking about when this part of Nigeria was really central to trade in West Africa. And then it says, historically, this particular function may have originated during a period in which the town of Oshogbo experienced rapid commercial growth and prosperity due to a strategic location at the intersection of important West African trade routes. Okay, so, and again, this is very consistent with ancient history elsewhere, where the women tended to develop the crafts. And a lot of it is elaborations and commercialization of domestic skills, home economics, weaving, pottery making, cooking, all of these things were cultivated by the women, really grew out of the city-state and served as a basis for civilization and culture. When these cities started not fighting but trading with each other, these domestic skills became commercial crafts. And then the next thing is, this is very interesting. Most of Oshun's devotees, apparently today, are organized in guilds of craftswomen, a factor that greatly enhances female group solidarity and fosters the economic independence of Yoruba women. So it shows here that this isn't just something that, it's not a religion that just happens in church. These are spirits and forces that are out in the world, personifying and solidifying and supporting important aspects of life. Okay, the next one. Now, and then these are some of her other roles. She has so many roles, something I flagged earlier. Divination. I've already shown how that's related to her influence, her ability to influence destinies. She has to know what your fate is before she can try to influence. A healer. She has a lot of, she has knowledge concerning herbs and other medicinal materials and procedures. And again, oftentimes that's the role of women in society. The enchantress, that's something that's discussed as at the end as one of her roles, and is somewhat misunderstood when in the diaspora, when the slaves were confronted with the Catholic religion, or the Catholic religion was confronted with Yoruban culture. She was the mother of divine twins and of the first Yoruba kings. That's related to prolific birth and politics. One of the things I liked about Oshun is that as opposed to some of the other goddess traditions, they give recognition to the importance of the physical act of childbirth and the rearing of infants. So often I don't see anything on that in these mythologies. And I thought that was really great. And then magician, related to all of her practical expert knowledge and skills. I use the word magician. In the book, they use the word witch, because witch now has a bad connotation, but for partly because of the disenfranchisement of women in the Christian traditions, but all of these esoteric knowledge that women had as regards healing. I put expert and secret knowledge, because sometimes the knowledge, if it's expert, some people know it and some don't. And that's just the nature of expert knowledge and skills. And you might know it but not be able to do it. But beyond that, some of these expert guilds would try to keep their knowledge secret. And so that reinforced the fact that some of this knowledge was only for some people. So again, my last thought here is that each of these roles is so important, but that all of them taken together are really pretty amazing. So that's my whole presentation. I do have the kind of flagging the kinds of questions and comments you might make. Again, what do you think the reflections, how does this presentation, Oshun's persona, how does that reflect on your own life experiences? Does it give you any new understanding, any new concepts or insights? Does it confirm any of your old concepts or insights? Comparisons with other traditions you're familiar? Do you have any other comments or questions? Those are just trying to trigger some of your thoughts, but I think it's, as I said at the beginning, it's just so important to share about these things.
All right, thank you, Brian. So now we're on to the questions and comments portion of the presentation. If anyone has any questions or comments, you can either type exclamation point in chat or raise your hand in Zoom. Give a few moments. First, we have Dave Miller. Dave,
Yes, hello. Yes, what I found very interesting was that, as you mentioned, their Yoruba society is polyandry. No, rather, sorry, the opposite. Polygamous. One husband with many wives, but Oshun is pictured as being in polyandry. The goddess has many husbands. So it's interesting because it seems like a contradiction between the social structure of the people and the divine structure. Unless, of course, one possible explanation is it could be like compensation, consolation for it having to be a polygamous society. So it's compensated for by the belief in the divine goddess being polyandrous. But that's just I'm just speculating.
May I comment on that?
Yeah, you can go.
Yeah, I agree with David's comment. I think that's just to my mind, when I encountered that, I saw that as a topic for further exploration. And the Isabella Price's book is focusing on the goddess power, and it raises questions sort of incidentally. But that is definitely one of the questions. To me, though, already, even though that's somewhat unclear in the text, I think it does flag the fact that whatever if you will, lessons we might draw from Oshun's persona need to be understood in a context that's probably not our own.
Yeah, and to just
Yeah.
add to that, I think with Oshun, and she was with many men, or many Oshuns that were male. I'm sorry, I said that wrong. Orishas that were male. I think it also goes to the simple fact that she was free, and that no one male husband could hold her down because she was such an independent spirit. One of the things that it talks about in the chapter is that some of the Orishas that were male, it's a rumor that she was the first female Orisha, but some of the Orishas that were male didn't respect her, and didn't respect her intelligence, and didn't respect what she brought to the table in terms of creation and in terms of business. And they had to go back and apologize to her. And Isabella Price gives a couple of those examples in the book. So I think when I look at it, it's not only that, it is what you said, that, it was a mostly polygamous society, so that men could have many wives, but women couldn't. So I think fitting into that context, and also kind of not, she would just go to different husbands. And I think it was because she was free, and she was free with her love, and she was free with her devotion, but she was also free sexually. So that's, and this is a symbol of, like, you couldn't really hold her down, or no one male person could hold her down, and that she could stand on her own and independent, which she gave power to a lot of African women to stand in their own power. So just some additional thoughts.
Thank you.
Okay, so up next I have Penny.
Yes, just a little bit related to what you have been saying about the story of the initial creation, when Oshun was the only female Orisha. And the male Orisha did not want to really let her participate in the process of creating the world. But then they found that they couldn't create the world without her. And they said that Olodumare, the supreme spirit, said to the male Orishas, basically, you know, you need to go back and, you know, talk with her and apologize, because she has to be part of creation, or it's going to be lopsided, it's not going to work. And so they did. And one of the aspects that they pointed out was that because of this, women had like human power. They didn't really believe like male power or female power. They were really just believed like humans had power, and women, Oshun being the first one, had that power basically from, it was part of the whole conception of the universe and the supreme reality. That was how he set things up, that male and women and men would both have power, and they would need to work together and be complementary for the world to work effectively. So I just thought that was interesting. And they had pointed out, even today, like when they have the annual celebration for Oshun, there's a time when, and they are both male and female followers of Oshun, the devotees, but they have a period when they can talk about the particular aspects for women and things that are important to them in society, to make sure that they maintain their place. And going back to the creation story, they say, if you know the balance isn't maintained between men and women, then society is not going to function. So it's very important to maintain that balance, and that women also have their, you know, needs met.
Thank you, Penny. Brian, do you want to say anything about that?
No, I thought that was great.
Me too. I just wanted to check to make sure that you didn't want to add anything additional before I moved on. But thank you, Penny.
Thank you.
You said that way better than I ever could have. Up next, I have Joe, followed by Allison.
Yeah, thank you, Penny. That was excellent. Now, my understanding is that Oshun was also a creative and a destructive force as well, for people that didn't necessarily respect the earth. Do you know what that actually meant, respect the earth, back in that time? Just out of curiosity. If anybody had any insights into that.
Do you want to go first, Brian? Or you want me to go?
You can go ahead.
So from what my understanding is that Oshun was, since she was kind of like the protective person because she was the mother, and you know, and she came from the river, you know, I could see where that would come from. I don't remember specifically reading that in the book, but I could see where that could come from. I know she fiercely protected her children, and maybe she considered the earth being part of her child. So she was compared to Kali in the Hindu religion, in that she protected the people that she loved, and that she was this fierce protectiveness. And in that sense, she was a destructive force, because she would destroy anyone that tried to come between her and her children. Now, like I said again, I don't remember reading specifically about her protecting the earth, and I could have just missed it, you know, but I could see that because
I read it actually outside the book, so it was something else in addition outside the book. So sorry about that.
no apologies necessary.
Yeah.
Yeah, there
So-
is something in the book about her being destructive.
Right.
In that, in that context, yes.
Yeah, with like droughts and things like that, and it's,
Right.
yeah, okay. And that's what I read. That was just one thing that had stuck out to me. Anyway.
And to me,
uh,
I guess it's consistent with, her role in transformations,
Yes.
in all phases of life. I will just say, in that context, I noted an inconsistency, again, something I'd want to clear up if I were to pursue Oshun further, because it says as individual human destinies, she cannot cause damage to humans because it would cause her own annihilation. So there's seem to be two different spheres there: the individual destiny, and then this larger concept of protecting the people.
Thank you. Up next, I have Allison, followed by Judy.
I was thinking about the whole idea of polygamy there. I think, it's a math problem. If you have one man with like 5 wives, that doesn't make sense unless there's far more women in the culture than men. So I think, this idea of the goddess having all her different lovers makes more sense. I think these women were quiet about things, but that's what I'm trying to say. Like, you can't have one guy with 5 different women unless there's 5 times as many women as men. So probably these women were also having their lovers, whether they told their husband that or not. That's my theory with that one. It just mathematically doesn't make sense. The other thing that I was thinking of is, the real reason I raised my hand, though, is I wanted to learn a little bit more about what you were saying about when people came here through slavery and how they interwove their traditional religion with Christianity. Because I know in South America, there's a lot of kind of mixing of traditional religions with Christianity, and they find ways to sort of like incorporate the two. And so I just wanted to, see if you had anything more you could add to that, because I think that part's really interesting.
Do you want me to go first, Brian, or?
Yeah, go ahead.
So one of the things that they talk about in African culture in general is that when they came over, and not only in America, but like you said, in South America, because slaves from Africa were distributed throughout the Americas and South America and North America. So one of the things is that people use to justify slavery or colonization is Christianity, that they were spreading the word of God, and that in a sense they were quote unquote saving Africans. And so one of the things that Africans had to do is they had to, in order to survive, they had to adopt the Christian religion, but they did bring their own, like I said before, they did bring their own traditions over. So when they brought their own traditions over, they did incorporate them into the Christian tradition. I think one of the most notable ones again was Mary, and that she was, a loving mother, and she was, if people would pray to Mary to protect their children, or to cover their children. But I think just like the Orishas were similar to the saints, and that you were praying to different Orishas, so sometimes they were incorporated in. Now, one thing I would love to do is study that a little more, because we didn't go too deep with that, and I think a further study of that would be very interesting as just another topic. But yeah, it's just very interesting how that got interconnected, and just to see how much it is interconnected. But because just reading off of this topic, but just reading various things throughout life, that it happens. So it would just be interesting to study a little more. Brian, any additional thoughts?
Yeah, I guess I would add that this, I think, again, I also agree that this is further study. This idea that women have multiple sexual partners, let's say husbands, and the men would have multiple sexual partners, wives. I think there's a bit of a mashup in this book between different periods of time. And that needs to be investigated a bit. I think in the past, it may well have been that women had multiple sexual partners, and that's less the case today. But it's just not, to me, it's not clear in the book. But it certainly is. There are societies that have, in the past, that have had that. Again, if we do a Nana, and I would like to do that next time, you'll see that it was a matrilineal society. Property was anciently, originally, in the earliest city-states, property was passed through the women. And so it didn't really matter that much who the sexual partners of the women were. It could be anybody. And so they tended to have multiple sexual partners. Again, all this is disputed, but there's some consensus on that. And there's an echo of that. This is a much later period with Oshun in the Yoruba society. So to me, it's conceivable that the women would have, and it talks to them about being co-wives and co-mothers. So there's a power center in amongst the women, and it's conceivable to me that that was complemented with matrilineal property ownership in the past, and maybe that has subsided. But in any event, that's an archetype that was carried over with the diaspora arriving out of the slave trade. And these understandings, and certainly the understanding amongst the Aruba is that this kind of behavior was archetypical and so probably acceptable. This archetype was characterized by the Spanish Catholics as the whore saint, puta santa. And and that's just taking the Catholic classifications of these behaviors and applying it, and these classifications were not classifications used by the Arubans at all. And so they tried to impose this classification on the women, and it just, I think it led to a lot of problems. The same is true with witchcraft. The medicine man, I guess you call them wizards, would be, that was certainly something that existed in the past and had benefits to society, with shamans and the rest, and women had played a very similar role in many different cultures, sometimes the same culture as the men. And when that got over into the Spanish Catholic culture, these witches, which are really, I like the word magician better, which were really just applications of, traditional knowledge in terms of healing. It's primarily that, but also the divination that we talked about in the presentation. Those were characterized as evil witchcraft because they were derived from some power other than the one true God. So it's just taking these classifications from Christianity and applying them to what were considered valid traditions in the African society. And it applied both to Oshun in particular as the whore saint, and also to all of the other gods who were dismissed as demons. So all these, the Orisha, that obviously were legitimate powers, spiritual powers for the Yorubas, were demonized by the Spanish Catholics. And you can see that. That's what happened to all of the indigenous cultures in Latin and South America.
I went to a dance performance once at the African American History Museum in Philadelphia, and it was a Haitian dance where they were, and I know it's like a religious, kind of like a religious ceremony where they're all wearing white, and as they danced, they started speaking like in tongues. I don't remember what it was called, but it was kind of fascinating. I don't know, these merging of these two cultures. It was just really mesmerizing to watch. And I don't remember exactly, there's a name for it, but I can't think of it offhand, but yeah.
Well, there is this, again, I'm just relying on the chapter in the book. But Isabella Price talks about and Evanique touched on this better, I think, in her presentation. We've talked about the gods and goddesses a lot, but there are people involved in supporting these traditions and enacting these myths. And it was stated in the book that some people are more or less able to channel the powers of these different gods and goddesses. And the ones who are adept at it can become priests and priestesses. And also these adepts are one of the way they channel these powers is through dance. And through the dance and the rhythmic sounds, the goddess comes to them, and it takes over their body. And this happens during the dance. And again, it's something that I think was just totally dismissed by the Spanish Catholics.
Thank
But
you.
to them, it's a
Oh,
very
sorry.
important spiritual practice.
Right. That was something like what I watched. It was like the god was through this one woman, I guess was like the main one. I guess she was the priestess. It was phenomenal, really. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you both. Up next, I have Judy, followed by Katie and Joe.
Hi, thank you for bringing this fantastic summary of the divine goddess and the divine femininity. So what historical period are we talking about when we talk about in Nigeria when this all started? Can anybody kind of tell me where?
Well, the furthest back, according to this book, again, neither Evanique and I are not experts on this, but according to the book, the furthest back it goes is 900 AD.
Okay. That's fascinating. Okay, so I live in Miami, where the Yorubas and the Oshuns and the Santerias and all these other things are very active today. But nobody ever talks about Nigeria. Nobody ever. What they talk about is in the sacred feminine, they talk about the Virgin Mary. And as you both said, she was syncretized by the Catholic religion, not Christian, but more Catholic than anything. But they couldn't call her the Virgin Mary because the virgin that they talked about, and they still do, and they venerate and adore, is brown. She's not white. So the Virgin Mary is one thing because she's white, and then the Virgen de la Caridad del Cobre, or the Virgin of Charity, of copper charity, it's very loosely translated, is very brownish skin. But she has the same types of energies that you mentioned in divine femininity, but today, and it's been around for several centuries, like since 1600s, more or less. Protector, not magician, they don't call her magician, but believer in all these miracles, like she walks on water and things like that. How she cures people. People do all kinds of they divinations. They sing the more, they dance. They wear all kinds of colors, like you mentioned something about yellow. They wear a lot of yellow. They have sunflowers. So a lot of the things that they do are similar to what you have been talking about. She's also considered this virgin as a healer, and people really believe in her. And there's and she also sees the future. So if you want to see your future, you go to one of these magicians or whatever they're called, shamans, and they'll give you your future with cards and with all kinds of other things. So it's very well alive here in Miami today, and of course in Cuba. And it's more in the Caribbean culture than anything else, more than South America, because it's a Caribbean thing. For this one that started like in 1600s, La Virgen de la Caridad del Cobre, the Virgin of, which is syncretized from Yoruba and Oshun and these divine feminines that originally they say that came from Isis. So that's all I wanted to say, is, kind of like give that perspective.
Um,
Well, that's
You want me-
great. Thank you.
yeah. One of the things I wanted to point out is that Oshun as healer, and I know we both touched on it briefly, but bringing it into perspective, so when when the Catholic Church kind of like demonized witchcraft and all of these things, and they had to hide it. But one of the things that Oshun is known for is being a healer. Like I was saying before, healing people of feminine problems, but also she was just a healer in general. And I think it's one of the things that's just fascinating to me is that in African culture in general, they had many different ways of healing. One of the ways is divination. One of the ways is also natural herbs and different elements of the earth that come together, and they would combine those things and give people potions or and things of that nature. And to me, I'm not surprised at all that Oshun is prominent in Miami, because like I said before, they came from Cuba. They came from when one of the Oshun was one of the things I said in my first presentation when I talked about myths and stories, is that they travel. So I'm not surprised at all that Oshun traveled, just because of the slave trade, and because again, these were also traditions, and these were also what people knew. So one of the things they knew is their healings and their potions, and one of the things that it was natural healing. And I could say from my experience being raised in the South, well, not being raised in the South, being raised by a Southern woman, I should say. I was raised in Philadelphia, by the way. But one of the things that she would tell me is that, one of the things that were passed down through tradition is, natural healings. Like if you had a cold, you didn't go to a doctor or anything like that. If you were sick, you were given some type of remedy. There were things that would naturally do to protect your immunity when you go to school so that you wouldn't get sick. But if you did, there was also things of that nature. So I could definitely see that being passed down and passed around as well. And what you were talking about before about you see people, and Allison referred to it too, is the dance. And Brian said it so beautifully, is that all these things were like people being, and like possessed has a negative connotation, but I think what was happening is that people were feeling the spirit, or and actually that's what they were saying, Christian traditions, especially in Baptist traditions. And I think too that it's kind of one of those things that were combined with Christianity. One of those other things that Allison had a question about, when people are catching the spirit in Southern Baptist churches or Pentecostal churches, that's something that's derived from the African culture of being, for a lack of a better word, possessed by the Orisha, like priestesses being possessed by the Orisha. So thank you for that. I think that just added some great clarity, and I hope what I said made sense, because I went a little all around.
Well, I know Allison's a dancer, and Judy also touched on the dancing. in Miami. Here's a little bit more on the dancing. The sensual and spiritual power of Oshun's dance is addressed as an important topic by Isabella Price. There's 3 stages to the dance. She starts out, the dancer starts out dancing the rhythms of the river of Oshun, so water waves. And then the second is Oshun taking her bath and playing in the water and pampering herself with fragrant soaps and oils. And then the third phase of the dance is the dancer going, reenacting, going back to the community where she plays the coquette. She struts and sways and she kisses and laughs provokingly into her audience. So there is a bit more. And then here's the description of what happens, with the dancer, and that was picked up both by Allison and Judy. In her rhythmic movements, worshipers are transformed into the divinity through the recognition of complementary relationships that honor movement, instrumental sound, and spiritual energy. The heightened awareness of the senses allows for new channels and dimensions as the performance unfolds. Oshun's dance becomes not only an invocation for the essence of vibrant female energy, but also a public display for the admiration and adoration of the female gender and the female body form. Within the gestures of Oshun, again, this is still in the dance, the viewers see the Aruba's concept of beauty, grace, and femininity. Oshun's beauty is openness. These are all virtues that were stressed by Evanique earlier. Openness, independence, alertness, and an empowered sense of self. So these are the things that come out through the dance, and really why it's so central to their spiritual practices.
It's kind of interesting because in so many countries, so many cultures, dance is a part of the religious experience. Like I've been to powwows before, and it's just mesmerizing. It was very similar to that dance that I saw. But what's kind of interesting is how in like where dance is derived from Europe, it's very removed from religion. It's still storytelling, but it's the religious aspect is just like wasn't ever really a part of it. So it
yes, that struck me as well. And I have to say that when I read this, I mentioned earlier the just as you're saying, I mentioned many different traditions. I talked about the East Asian and South Asian. The in Thailand, I've seen from India and Vietnam, other places, the dancing is so important, and I've heard descriptions of the dancing that reminded me of this description of the dancing by the Arubans.
Mm-hmm.
And really dancing with the same interplay of music, but what did they say here? Movement, instrumental sound, and spiritual energy. They all can come out in the dance.
Yeah, I mean, you still feel that spiritual energy in a way, but yet we just cut it off completely from religion in the West. And I don't know why that happened. Like, when did it happen? I don't know. It's something I'd like to learn more about. Definitely.
I want to say something about the dancing with the Santeria people here in Miami and in the Caribbean coast. They sing also when they dance. I mean, there's like 4 or 5 women that sing, and then the men drum. So they're drumming, and some women are singing, not all of them. And then the woman dances, and she's asked to dance by a male that goes and picks her and brings her into the center of the ring. and then dances, but it's like a coquettish type of dance, like I'm alluring you type of dance. And then the female is like, she doesn't want to go with him, but she accepts it eventually. And then another woman then interrupts, and it's like an interruption of men, women. And then women that are singing in a repetitive motion, the same types of stanzas. And the drums are more or less the same. So it's almost hypnotic. And it's very transcendental for a lot of people. Like they go into these trances, and I've seen them a lot because I visited that area in the Caribbean area of Panama, where they have these dances all the time. And anyway, so I just wanted to say, there's a lot of alcohol to be also. So people drink a lot to get like, in other transcendent moods. So the dancing is just part of it. It's just, like a ritual. It's pretty interesting. And it still exists everywhere in the Caribbean areas. But you have to go, they're like secret societies. Not everybody, and they dress really strange. Like they put ropes around their feet, and they dress with different types of rags, things like that. It's not, and the women have these skirts, and they twirl their skirts around with a lot of like coquettish type of alluring the man. So it's very interesting. And the dances are only during certain parts of the year. It's not like all the time. And then you kind of have to get invited to them. Not everybody can go. They're kind of secretive. So anyway, so that's my experience on these dances. Just wanted to share that.
Thank you. Up next, I have Joe.
Actually,
Thank you, Joe, for waiting.
David can go next. That's fine.
Okay.
I can go after Dave.
Okay, David Miller.
Yes, hello. On the dancing, what's interesting, there seems to be within the various religions, well, even take the Abrahamic, you have that division between those who go to God in solemnity and those who go to God in joy. So, in Christianity, we have a lot of the churches where there is in the South, where there is dancing and singing and exuberance. They're going to God in joy, whereas for some reason the more European tradition has been going to God in solemnity. You get the same thing in Islam, where the Sufi tend to be more exuberant, and in Judaism, there's the Hasid, that tradition, the ones who wear the wide hats. They tend to dance, so they're going to God in joy, as opposed to going to God in dour solemnity. So it's interesting that you get these divisions within the religions. So, and as Alison was asking, what's the explanation? Well, who knows? I mean, maybe you could say just psychological disposition, but nevertheless, there is that different type of manifestations within, well, at least within the Abrahamic religions, which are the ones I've just mentioned. Well, thank you.
I'll just note one thing. I think in the Abrahamic religions, like you said, there's certain, even in the Abrahamic religions, which is Baptist, Christianity, Protestant, there are different ways of worship. And, and some, like, even in the Bible, David was seen dancing in the street. So there is dancing in the Bible, and it is celebrated. And, there's music and things of that nature. I just think, like, in terms of worship, there's different types of worship, and people choose which type it is. And I think where we run into problems is when we demonize one way of worshiping God and say that, and then say that another way of worship is superior. And so, there's room, I think, even in Christianity, I think there's people that dance and sing and have a great time. And then you have Catholicism that can be very solemn, or they'll do a more, because they'll do more like liturgical dances, which is more calm and serene. And I think there's room for both. Um, I think as to why, I don't know, maybe people just feel more comfortable worshiping a certain way, whereas opposed to others. I just think it's interesting that one way was just demonized, like that dancing was just in certain sects of Christianity were demonized and it was encouraged in another. I just think that's just interesting. Brian, you have anything to add?
Well, on the dancing point, there are amazing. I love dance, and I seek it out wherever I can. And I'll just note there's some the Dunhuang caves in Western China have paintings of the most amazing dancers, and it's I'm not sure what. Well, people believe that it's tied in with a Buddhist, a variation of Buddhist traditions. I'm not so. I don't know. That's just my recollection. But it is, those paintings are breathtaking, and there are people who now perform that kind of dance. They perform in the United States. I think it's Yen Shun or Yun Shen, and those are available to go see. I've seen them in New York City, and I've seen them in Phoenix. I've seen them in DC. They are, to some extent, reenactment of those dances, and they're just amazing.
Yeah, I just wanted to say briefly, which you kind of touched on, that it's really the doctrine in certain religions, that they thought dancing was bad. And I think a lot of it might have to do because they didn't want men and women touching each other. But even when I grew up, one of my friends attended a Southern Baptist church, and she wasn't allowed to go to any school dances because dancing was evil. You weren't supposed to dance. So there definitely were certain sects that made that part of their practice, that dancing was not allowed.
Very good point, Penny. Thank you. Oh,
So does
Well, that-
anybody else have something to add?
actually, Joe's been waiting patiently, so I'm
Oh,
just going to
okay.
go to
Well,
Joe.
as long as I am gonna move away from the dancing, if that's okay, for a moment. One of the things that I, found that was interesting in the book is the idea of the sexism aspect of things. Sexism, and then there's a paragraph from the books. Sexism needs to be addressed since it threatens the vibrancy of the human community to which Oshun and her sisters give birth. African women do not have power do have the power to challenge any threat to social order. In light of the Yoruba creation narrative, which recounts how the male Orishas attempt to negate Oshun, threaten to destroy humanity, it's been illustrated that the male domination and sexism generate chaos and ultimately can cause an intolerable imbalance. This belief system encourages Yoruba men to come to terms with female empowerment within the overall patriarchal framework of Yoruba society. Forgive me. But it's just interesting that it's also how she serves as empowering women in the culture itself. I think that's an important aspect of, kind of when you're talking about, the divine feminine, is that how is it manifesting itself in the culture today? I don't know if that's how, I'm not very familiar with what goes on, but I found that part to be very interesting.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's that also struck me, and how, as opposed to some of these goddess stories we'll be looking at, like Isis. Isis still does have some existence underground, but this is still a vibrant force in the world, and one that we're often not aware of. And the fact that these women can still get together under the aegis of Oshun and in guilds, and also in movements like equality and social welfare, are just are amazing. It just shows the kind of empowerment that can come from this type of goddess tradition.
Yeah, and oh, sorry, go ahead, Joe.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
And just to add to that too, I think the aspect of women being good business women, and Oshun being one of the Orishas of good business, empowers women, right? So, one of the things is that if a woman knows her worth and a woman can, provide for herself, she has power. And so to me, when you talk about, sexism and empowerment, I think Orisha is a great stand. Oshun is a great stand for that, because of, she teaches, she's the Orisha of women being independent, providing for themselves and providing for their families. And I think one thing we have to remember is, when we talk about myths, a myth is meant to tell a certain story or to teach a lesson. Or when we look at myths in society, that's what they're meant to do. Whether Oshun was a real goddess or not, it doesn't matter. But think about what the culture was trying to teach women by giving all these powers to Oshun and this goddess or this deity. I think that's just one of the things that I like the most about Oshun, is that she was about business and about empowering women and allowing women to be independent so that they could stand on their own. And not necessarily that it's bad to depend on a man, but that they didn't have to. And that it could create a more equal partnership between men and women, and that each one could express themselves. And I think there's another part I love to the story that Penny was talking about earlier, where, they didn't respect her and, and her role in creation, and she took her power away and they saw what happened. It goes back to the whole masculine feminine energy of, life. Like, people, there's a masculine energy and a feminine energy, and they have equal parts in the world. And when one is out of balance, you see it in the world. So yeah, just to add to that.
Yeah, just really quickly is that, it also, the very next line, with all that said, it appears the Yoruba gender roles are complementary rather than antagonistic. And I think that that's actually, that's important. That's important for a society to actually be able to thrive, so that they kind of, that obviously each gender is respected for what they actually bring to the to society. I think that this is one of the key themes of when we're talking about the divine feminine. It's also how the feminine and masculine actually work together. So anyway, I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah,
Thank you,
I agree with
oh,
that. Oh, I'm sorry. I would agree with that. Plus, that those devotees of the divine feminine are more important, with the importance of that complementary play between male and female for the wholeness and of humanity. And that, unfortunately, I think in a lot of the masculine traditions, it's more oppressive to the female.
Yeah, I would just say one thing. When they were talking a little related to what Joe said, that Oshun was the goddess of fertility and abundance and patroness of craftsmen and our women and stuff, because they said that when women would pray to her, they would pray for children, and then they would pray for the resources to take care of the children, because if you have more, somebody else with a mouth to feed. And that one of the understanding of society was that if you were a good businesswoman, that was made you a good mother because you would have the resources to take care of the children and to help your family. So in the society as a whole, they're looking at people who are good businesswomen as good mothers.
Yeah, I hadn't
Can-
thought of that, but that strikes me that this is a great, in that way, this is a great archetype for modern American women.
You know what's so funny?
Very
It-
much so.
Yeah, sorry. One of the things that brought up to me was the Proverbs 31 woman. That woman was also good with business. She took care of her home and she took care of her kids, and her husband was supported, and her husband loved and adored her. You know, and respected her business acumen. She was respected in the community. So in a sense, you know, that type of woman was also in the Bible. And I agree that, you know, Oshun is a great archetype for the for the modern woman in general, in particular the modern American woman.
I hadn't really thought of that till now, but I think that's absolutely true.
Yeah. Okay, so up next I have Katie, who's been waiting patiently, followed by Allison and Judy. Katie, thank you for waiting.
Yeah, where Penny just said fit well with what I was about to say, that if it's like a woman, it's almost like I just was surprised how much overlapped with the Taoist idea of mother, like everything kind of coming back to a mother. So like all, you know, all these men, that's also her, like showing her power, all coming back to her as the goddess of fertility. That makes more sense. And then the dance, that I was just going to make a small point that I think we don't do dance, but they're definitely like, when you go to church, you sing, you know, chorus, or you recite hymns together. So I think we do have our own version of something we do in a community.
Thank you, Katie. Brian, do you have anything to add before I move on?
Well, it's just on my mind. Who's up next?
I have Allison and Judy.
Okay, let's let them go.
Okay, Allison, you're up next.
Yeah, one thing that I was thinking about was that I think the thing is, back to what we were saying about dance, ballet originated from court dances at Versailles. So then once ballet took over, and then modern dance, and, you know, all of the other dances, the thing is they all started after the scientific revolution. So that's probably part of why they were separated from religion in a way. But I think the other thing is that until, you know, probably the last 100 years in Europe, dancers were considered to be like very, very scandalous because they were showing too much skin and lifting their legs up high, and it was just like a, you know, you were like a, I don't know, like a scandal to your family if you became a ballet dancer. So that part, I think maybe the thing is, in these other cultures where they're continuing, like the dance traditions never really ended, so that's why they became religious, because they started that way and then just continued on. So I don't know, these are just thoughts I'm thinking about. The other thing that I wanted to think about, that I wanted to mention, was I just came back from Greece, and one thing that I really noticed in Athens is that I thought it really struck me that, like, I never really think about it before, but it's probably the only city in Europe really where that's devoted to gods that aren't out of Christianity. And, you know, that right in the middle of town is the Parthenon, which is this temple for a goddess, for Athena. And I thought, well, how does that affect the culture when everything is about worshiping a female goddess? And then I was in an art museum and I saw a painting that had all of these, they had Athena, and then they had all these people sort of like thanking her. And I thought, I think sometimes one of the problems that we have is like, we always have this idea, we get stuck on it, of that Adam was perfect until Eve came along and ruined him. And I think, you know, I feel like sometimes what happens in this culture is it's like very like antagonistic between the two genders. And rather than respecting the contributions of each, like Joe was saying, I mean, I don't know why, but I feel like maybe in these cultures where you have gods and goddesses and they're both elevated to this level, then you recognize that we need all of these different characteristics. And they're all within both of us. Like sometimes we act more masculine, sometimes more feminine, depending on what we're doing. And some things just are easier for men to do than for women. I mean, they're taller, than most of us, than me certainly. But I think that's one of the things that I like about this is just really, having the respect for the many different gifts that people give, whether masculine or feminine.
Thank you, Allison. Brian, do you want to add anything before I move to Judy?
I think that's right on. I mean, that's one of the things I hope comes out of these meetups is that people appreciate more the feminine, and even, just taking time to think about it and voice your experience or opinions. It's like voicing your opinions is like an offering to the divine feminine. And I think that's really important because of this balance that is needed to overcome the antagonistic attitudes.
Thank you. Up next, I have Judy.
I want to know a little bit more about Oshun's relationship to Isis. What do they have in common? What traits can be seen between Oshun and Isis? Is there anyone that can help me with that?
Allison, did you want to talk about that?
Evanique?
No. Or Evanique?
Yeah, sure. So I think the similarities between Isis and Oshun is that is really that she's the protective mother that is very protective of their children, and that both women are very powerful. Isis was a very powerful figure in Egypt. She was very beautiful, and I think Isis is more the thing, like she put things together, like she had to put Osiris back together. And like she had to, even with her son Horus, when he was having a conflict with Set, like she had to kind of be like the peacemaker. So in that sense, she was just a very powerful figure. Oshun, in that same way, being a businesswoman, obviously she has to, if you think about it, she has to negotiate, she has to bring people to the table and things of that nature. So those are the similarities I see. Brian, do you want to add anything?
Yes, so similarities and differences. The origin of Isis, it's more clearly, she's the daughter of someone. She's the daughter of the sky god and the earth goddess, as I recall. And I have it written in my book, but her genealogy is a little clearer. And she was, these were very primordial forces, embodiments of the very primordial forces, her mother and father. And then she became the embodiment of some natural forces. First of all, the rivers. And so that's the first similarity with Oshun is Isis was the goddess of the Nile River and the annual floods, the periodic floods that nurtured the land. Another similarity is that she complemented Osiris, who was he was a male god. Osiris was her brother and husband, and they shared powers. So again, it's very complementary, cooperative enterprise. And when Osiris had gone missing, in the way mentioned by Evanique, Isis took over and ruled things. One difference that I see is another difference is that Isis is identified with certain animals like the cow, whereas Osiris was the bull, and the vulture, and I think possibly the snake. I'd have to look that up again. And I don't remember, at least in this book, any mention between ocean and animals, any particular animal. So that's a difference. But beyond that, the multiplicity of roles that are played by Isis are very similar to the multiplicity of roles played by Oshun. And that is something that I think is played out in all of these goddess traditions and really distinguishes them from men. Men typically have one role, like god of war or god of ironworking. The women have lots of roles. And I think that reflects the way things are in real life. Isis was the first, just as with Oshun, Isis was the mother of the gods, and in Oshun was the mother of the first Yoruba kings, and Isis was the god of all the pharaohs, each of the pharaohs. And that's epitomized by the fact that they sit on the Isis throne. The throne is one of her, one of the ways that she manifests herself. Just as a baby sits on the lap of the mother, the king or the pharaoh sits on the lap of Isis, the throne. So that is very much a similarity with the Oshun. And then the importance of all the different crafts that Oshun had also. Isis was more the domestic arts and then crafts. So at least in this depiction by Isabella Price, they don't talk so much about Oshun as goddess of domestic arts, but already as commercial crafts. But commercial crafts tended to evolve out of domestic arts. Isis has more of also an emphasis on domestic arts, but each of them played key roles at the level of nature, politics, economics, family life, and then another key thing, intergenerational transformation. I think that's a really key point for Isis and Oshun, and something that distinguishes, in general, goddesses from gods.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Penny.
I just wanted to add one quick point from the book, which was in the religious hierarchy now, the chief priestess for Oshun, who's in charge of, the religious ceremonies for worshiping her, is also considered the mother of the ruler, the male ruler of society, and they rule together. And so it's well, not directly Oshun, but Oshun's priestess is the mother of the existing ruler in the society, and that's like Isis was.
Yeah, that's really right.
Thank you both. Does anybody else have any questions or comments? If so, you can type exclamation point in chat or raise your hand in Zoom.
I hope Judy's not sorry she asked the question.
The contrary, I think you were very clear in comparing and seeing the similarities of both Oshun and Isis, because I've always been fascinated by Oshun, but more the modern version of Oshun, more than Oshun. So it has been very enlightening for me to understand where the modern version of Oshun came from. And so the ancestral part of the modern version of Oshun is Isis, I think. And this is where she came from, and all her values of divine feminine came from there. So it was very clear. Thank you. So I also wanted to add that the modern version of Oshun is very family oriented. I don't know if we've mentioned that. She protects families more than women and men independently. she's like a family goddess. People adore her because of how she protects the families, including grandmothers and grandfathers and everybody else in the family. It's not just the mother, father, children. She's adored. I mean, really, literally adored for her protection of families being continuing united as much as possible. I just wanted to add that.
Thank
That's
you,
something
Judy.
that I thought about that issue because in the description by Isabella Price in her book, there was the role of Isis as wife and mother, mother of within a family context, not mother of a people, was barely mentioned. And I was trying to understand why that would be, and I think it's because of this that she was really very flirtatious and even promiscuous. I mean, I kind of soft pedaled that. She's explained as being very promiscuous and flirtatious and kind of loving and leaving him when in the book. And so, that's not very consistent with the monogamous marriage and family life as we understand it. But so maybe that's one reason that it didn't that her role as wife was explained or wasn't discussed in the way we might expect. And I would also guess that this role, that what you've highlighted in the current Oshun is something that's probably added, I would guess was added from the contact with a more monogamous lifestyle. Just a guess.
Penny, it looks like you went.
Sure,
Sorry.
I'm not sure when people refer in the modern version of Oshun, if it's monogamous or not. I don't think it has to do with sexual preferences or anything. It's just the family unit that's important. Whatever the representative of the father or the brothers and the sisters, and it's more that it's more like a unity of family more than the other stuff. That's how I see it, at least,
Yeah, that whole area is very interesting, and wow, I'd love to understand that better.
Well, come to Miami. You'll see it here. It's alive and kicking. It's so important here. They have these shops where they're incredible. They're called botanicas. I don't know how to say that in English, but they're botanist types of shops. But they're like, they sell things for your altars and icons. And these icons can be Tibetan, and they can be Christian, and they can be Catholic, and they can be Jewish, and they can be, I mean, everything is there. And you go in there, it's like seeing temples and icons of all the different temples and holy books of all the different religions. And they sell flowers, and they sell incense, and they sell all kinds of candles, and they're all over the place. And I mean, it's like a store, situation where you can go in. Almost every neighborhood has one. And so it's really all this religion of Oshun, and they call it Yemaya, they call it different names, Yoruba, and there has different names, but it's really alive. Now, of course, it's much more in Cuba and in the Caribbean area of Brazil, for example, only but not inside Brazil, and the Caribbean areas of Colombia and Panama and Belize and all these other areas, only the Caribbean part. When you go inside the country, you don't see any of that. But it's here in Miami, as it's like the capital city of Latin America. You'll see a little bit of every single culture. So it's not just the Cubans that honor Oshun and Yemaya and all these other gods and goddesses. It's from all over the world. They honor the divine feminine and the divine masculine and the holy word, and they're very spiritual, these places. So it's really interesting.
That's great to hear.
Yeah.
Up next, I have Joe.
Yeah.
No, I was just going to express my gratitude to you, Evanique, and then Brian, and Penny too. I have to include you, and Judy actually bringing your knowledge here this evening. This was really enlightening. So I very much enjoyed it, and I'm enjoying the series. So I just wanted to express gratitude for everything you guys did here this evening. So
Thank you, Joe. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And thank you for your contribution as well. And thank you everyone for your contribution tonight. Penny, you're up.
Oh, okay. I just had a quick thought when you were talking about the traditions in Miami and stuff. I think something similar. When I was in New Orleans, I visited a voodoo church, and it's very similar from what I can tell. And they had all the like little saint statues, and they said that the people identified, like with the African gods, whatever, because it was the saint of sailors or something. Then they knew who that should be, the Orisha or the African god. And so they just, use those as symbols because those were acceptable. So they could put them out on a mantelpiece or anything, but they all knew that it was not really the Catholic saint. It was the African saints that they were worshiping to. That was part of the, hiding your religion, and disguising it. So they had the little figures, but everybody knew who they were, and they weren't the Catholic figures.
That's a very good point. In New Orleans, especially, I think, because I think they were more French. You could see it all over New Orleans, and probably now it's probably more prominent now in modern day because they can express it. But you're right, they totally hid it in plain sight. I just think that's very interesting.
Yeah.
Brian, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, I've already said it a couple times, but maybe two thoughts. I do see these as very useful meetups in the way I outlined at the beginning. And the second is, I think we should do Inanna next time.
I agree.
Okay.
Joe, did you have a?
yeah, I just want to make sure this doesn't take away from Brian and Penny's analytics homework. So anyway, it's just one comment. Anyway,
Although Evanique and I need to coordinate a bit more because there's been some tremendous duplication here. We're probably good in the end.
Yeah.
Thank you, Evanique, for making the divine feminine still alive and kicking. It's really important, and you too, Brian. So appreciate all your input that all the teaching that you've given us tonight. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. My pleasure. Thank you, Brian, for being my partner in this.
You're welcome. Thank you, David.
Thank you. Have a great night, everyone.
Okay.
Good night.
Good night.